The Saturday Free School is committed to the political and ideological education of the people. In this regard, we are more than a school. We are an instrument of the people. We seek ideological clarity, theoretical sophistication, and a practice of principled unity. We investigate the logics of social movements and methods of radical and revolutionary organizing. Located at the historic Church of the Advocate in North Philadelphia, our work is among the poor and working classes. The Saturday Free School is an organization of organizers and a school for organizers. Its historical antecedents and inspiration are the freedom schools organized by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Mississippi and Alabama during the voting rights movement, the Black Panther Party's freedom schools, the anti-fascist free German universities in the 1920s, the committees for the defense of the revolution in Cuba, and the Bolivarian circles in Venezuela. We have been organizing conferences and symposiums, among them Pam Africa, a revolutionary daughter of the dust, her life and work, in April 2012. W.E.B. Du Bois, Africana Studies in the Human Future, April 2013. Maroon the Implacable, the collected writing of Russell Maroon Shoatz, April 2013. Black Liberation and Problems of the 21st Century, a conference to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's Letter from a Birmingham Jail, October 2013. The Black Radical Tradition in Our Time, January 2016. Revolutionary Science for Radical Times, Engaging Logics, Knowledge, and Action, December 2016. And Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution, Our Common Future, in January 2017. Founded in March 2012 at Temple University, we attempted at that time to create an ongoing dialogue and relationships between Temple students, particularly in African American studies, and the Black and poor communities surrounding Temple. For the students, it was the start of a type of service learning. We were connected to a student organization called the Radical Philosophy Circle. After a year, we moved to the Church of the Advocate, bringing us closer to the people. We have since benefited from the generosity of the church. Together, the church and the Free School have sponsored conferences and other activities. The Free School studies and engages in conversation with a wide body of thinkers and schools of thought, including Frantz Fanon, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Mao Zedong, Didi Kosambi, Ashada Shakur, Hortense Spillers, Richard Wright, Ames Cesar, William Shakespeare, Immanuel Kant, G.W.F. Hegel, Huey P. Newton, Angela Davis, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Antonio Gramsci, Karl Marx, V.I. Lenin, George Jackson, Grace Lee Boggs, Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Nkrumah, Fidel Castro, and others. However, our theoretical and ideological anchorage is in the thinking and practice of W.E.B. Du Bois and James Baldwin, two of the most important thinkers of the modern epoch. Each in distinct ways went where the human intellect had not previously gone, advancing new and profound ways of understanding the white supremacist social system, colonialism, and modern capitalism. Each was an activist and radical. Each was anti-white supremacy, anti-imperialist, anti-war, and for socialism as an alternative to capitalist exploitation and oppression. The Free School is committed to the search for truth, and we believe that reason, democratic discourse, science, and struggle make the attainment of truth possible. We locate the search for truth within the aspirations and struggles of the people. Universities, due to their deep ties to the neoliberal capitalist order, fail to create knowledge for the people, or knowledge to liberate the people. They exploit their employees, gentrify poor and working class communities, and have become ideological surrogates for the 1%. To produce knowledge to liberate people, we see the need for spaces outside of these institutions. We uphold the idea that theory must be connected to struggle and to transforming the world. We insist that to know the world, we must be engaged in the struggle to transform it. We are internationalists and believe in intercivilizational unity. We draw, moreover, upon the many pedagogies of the oppressed. We build upon the Black radical tradition, the rich body of thought, practice, scholarship, art, literature, music, and poetry that emerged from the fight for Black and human liberation. As well, we embrace the heritages of the Asian, African, and Latin American anti-colonial thoughts and practices, as well as the radical and proletarian wing of the European Enlightenment, the Haitian, French, Russian, Chinese, and Cuban revolutions, situate our work within the world revolutionary process. The celebration of our 5th year is dedicated to looking forward. In this moment of a general crisis of the system and of ideological and political uncertainty, hence the ideological and political education of the people is paramount. And as part of the process of radical social change, the people must be equipped with knowledge of their situation, its causes, who benefits from their plight, and what can be done to free them and produce a better life for them and their children. Like Frantz Fanon, we believe that spontaneous action is a starting point for people's movements, but not an end point. For the people to become the agents of their liberation, they must be armed with ideas, theories, and worldviews that reflect their experiences and with organizing strategies and tactics that reflect their interests. We are both realists and optimists. The people's capacity to free themselves inspires our optimism. At last, we dedicate this conference to the heroic legacy of Comandante Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruiz, leader of the Cuban Revolution. His revolutionary example will forever inspire us as we go forward to meet new challenges. Thank you.
I Have by Nicholas Goulian. When I see and touch myself, I, Juan, with nothing only yesterday, and Juan with everything today. I turn my eyes and look, I see and touch myself, and ask myself, how could this have been? I have the pleasure of going about my country, owner of all there is in it, looking closely at what I do not or could not have before. I can say cane, I can say mountain, I can say city, say army, now forever mine, yours, ours, in the vast splendor of sunbeam, star, flower. I have the pleasure of going, me, a farmer, a worker, a simple man. I have the pleasure of going, just for an example, to a bank and speak to the manager, not in English, not in sir, but in caballero, as we say in Spanish. I have, that being Black, no one can stop me at the door of a dance hall or bar, or even on the rug of a hotel. Scream at me that there are no rooms, a small room, and not a colossal room, a tiny room where I can rest. I have, that there are no rural police to seize me and lock me in a precinct jail, or tear me from my land, and cast me in the middle of the highway. I have that having the land, I have the sea. No country clubs, no high life, no tennis, no yachts, but from beach to beach and wave to wave, gigantic blue open democracy, in short, the sea. I have, that I have learned to read, to count. I have learned to write and to think and to laugh. I have that now I have a place to work and earn. What I have to eat, I have, what I had to have. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So I'm going to sing 2 songs. The first is in the framework of the nation state, and the second is in the framework of civilizations and intercivilizational unity. And we'll all talk more about that as the day goes on. The first song is a parody of 2 nationalist anthems written by a poet named Muhammad Iqbal. But this is written by a Marxist named Sahir Ludhianvi, who's parodying that. The first is called Sare Jahan Se Acha, which means the whole world is ours, and it was an Indian nationalist anthem. The second is Chino Arab Hamara, Hindustan Hamara, which was a pan-Islamist anthem saying China and Arabia are ours, India is ours. So Sahir Ludhianvi, he's writing this in the context of the Indian nationalist movement and the kind of aftermath and Nehruvian socialism, but the broken promises of that, especially to the poorest people of the nation. And he wrote it for Bollywood, so this was a song that really reached the people and spoke to the people. The second song I'm going to sing is by another Marxist, but from Pakistan, named Faiz Ahmed Faiz. And he wrote this song in resistance to Islamic fascist dictatorships in Pakistan. And he writes this song using the words of Islam against those who abuse the name of Islam to oppress people. So the first song. La la la, la 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 la. Or maybe I'll do this without the mic, actually. Okay. Chino Arab hamara, Hindustan hamara, रहने को गढ़ नहीं है, सारा जहां हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा, ला ला ला, ला 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 ला. खोली बिछिन गई है, बेंचें बिछिन गई हैं, सड़कों पे घूमता है अब कारवां हमारा. जेबें है अपनी खाली, क्यों देता वरना गाली, वो संतरी हमारा, वो पासबान हमारा. चीनो अरब हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा, रहने को गढ़ नहीं है, सारा जहां हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. जितनी भी बिल्डिंगें थी सेतों ने बांध ली है, फुटपाथ बम्बई के है आशियाँ हमारा. सोने को हम कलंदर आते हैं बोरे बंदर, हर एक कुली यहाँ का है राज़दा हमारा. चीनो अरब हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा, रहने को घर नहीं है, सारा जहां हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. तालीम है अधूरी, मिलती नहीं मजूरी, मालूम क्या किसी को दर्द निहा हमारा. चीनो अरब हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा, रहने को गढ़ नहीं है, सारा जहां हमारा. ला ला ला, ला 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 ला. पतला है हाल अपना, लेकिन लहू है गाढ़ा, फौलाद से बना है हर नौजवान हमारा. मिलजुल के इस वतन को ऐसा सजाएंगे हम, हैरत से मुंतकेगा सारा जहां हमारा. चीनो अरब हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा, रहने को गढ़ नहीं है, सारा जहां हमारा, हिंदुस्तान हमारा. So that's the first song. The next song, I forgot to say also, we have translation so you can follow along in English. Okay, so the next song is Hum Dekhenge, which means we will see. Yeah, it's the first song in the paper. We will see, we shall see. And I've already sang the song, so some of you know it already, but हम देखेंगे हम देखेंगे, लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे, लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे, वो दिन के जिसका वादा है हम देखेंगे, जो लोए अज़ल में लिखा है हम देखेंगे, लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे, वो दिन के जिसका वादा है हम देखेंगे, जो लोए अज़ल में लिखा है हम देखेंगे। जब जुल्मो सितम के कोहे गरा रूही की तरह उड़ जाएंगे, जब जुल्मो सितम के कोहे गरा रूही की तरह उड़ जाएंगे, हम महकूमों के पाँव तले ये धरती धड़ धड़ धड़केगी, और अहले हकम के सरों पर जब बिजली कड़कड़ कड़केगी, हम देखेंगे वो दिन के जिसका वादा है हम देखेंगे। बस नाम रहेगा अल्लाह का, जो गायब भी है हाजिर भी, जो मंजिर भी है हाजिर भी, उठेगा नलहक का नारा, जो मैं भी हूँ और तुम भी हो, और राज करेगी कल के खुदा, जो मैं भी हूँ और तुम भी हो, हम देखेंगे वो दिन के जिसका वादा है हम देखेंगे, लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे, जब अर्ज़े खुदा के काबे से सब बुत उठवाए जाएंगे, जब अर्ज़े खुदा के काबे से सब बुत उठवाए जाएंगे, सब ताजे उछाले जाएंगे, सब तख्त गिराए जाएंगे, हम देखेंगे वो दिन के जिसका वादा है हम देखेंगे, वो लोए अज़ल में लिखा है हम देखेंगे, लाजिम है कि हम भी देखेंगे, हम देखेंगे वो दिन के जिसका वादा है हम देखेंगे।
You know, W.E.B. Du Bois, in his moving novel entitled The Dark Princess, said that what he envisioned in writing the novel and for the future was the unity of Pan-Africa and Pan-Asia. And I think as we go through this day, you are going to see that manifested as it is actualized in the day-to-day struggles in this community, in this city, in this nation, and in a world in crisis. So Meghna Chandra, who was born in the United States but, pardon? Yeah, born in India and raised here, but in a very traditional family and studied for 12 years traditional Indian music. So it was a real treat to be, to have that opportunity to hear Meghna this morning. I'd just like to, read you so you'll know our outline of what this panel is about. It's entitled The Political Education of the People, What Forms Should It Take? We believe that the sustained, slow work of political education of the people is what leads to revolutionary moments. Moments of political crisis can lead to spontaneous action, but it is only when such action has ideological direction and political organization that it can serve as the basis of change. Revolutions do not occur overnight, and for any revolutionary seizure of power to be sustainable, it must be backed by masses of people that are conscious of their role in history. We recognize that the capitalist system utilizes the media as an effective means of controlling thought. However, working and poor people face a contradiction by virtue of their material conditions, which are often at odds with what the capitalist propaganda machine will have them believe. It is the work of political education to heighten and expose this contradiction, to let people see the truth. While our ideological direction must come from the worlds of working and poor people, we reject the idea that the people already know the truth. Hence, the ideological direction of political education must start with the material conditions of working and poor people. Political thought that emerges from the people is the only one that can serve to develop revolutionary consciousness. We reject attempts at education that try to bring the language of academic discourse to working people. Such language, immersed in identity politics today, is an attempt of co-optation of radical thought. In the words of Fidel Castro, this is a battle of ideas with ruling class ideology in the United States and must be fought to be able to utilize a moment of crisis, which left our neighbors as the sole superpower, that means the United States, in a unipolar world. Unrivaled in the political, economic, military, technological, and cultural fields. Fidel went on to say, I do not mean the value of their culture, but rather the tremendous power they exercise to impose their culture on the rest of the world. And finally, we say, the Saturday Free School engages in the struggle for ideological clarity every week. We believe the current political moment requires an anti-war movement, a deep understanding of the white supremacist social system, and a rejection of identity politics through a fight against the misleadership classes in our communities. Our members will talk about their experiences with the texts we study and how this dynamically interacts with the day-to-day lives, with our day-to-day lives and struggles. Let me just introduce our panelists, all very good friends of mine. Our first here is Derek Gantz. Derek is probably in the Free School the most complete Renaissance human being. Yeah. And the display in the back is part of his library and part of his collection of art. We've not been to his house yet, but he continues to invite us. This is Derek Gantz. Stand up, Derek. The preeminent rapper in the Saturday Free School is next to him. Pardon me. Yeah, I wasn't going to use your Facebook name. Mark de la Maison, or Mark House in the ghetto. You know what I'm saying? The further you get from the ghetto, the more sophisticated you become. But Mark is an extraordinary thinker. His forte is critical deconstruction of everybody and everything. And next to him is Hugh Munchie Moore. Munchie comes out of South Philadelphia and out of the boxing gyms of South Philadelphia, as well as a lot of the street corners. And he has that unique quality of bringing to text, be it Baldwin or be it Kant or be it Gramsci, the day-to-day life world of the black proletariat, especially in South Philadelphia. Munchie has been a shipyard worker. He has traveled to many countries in the world, and you will see when he speaks the enlightenment that he brings each week to the free school. So without further ado, I'm going to give each of our panelists 12 minutes, and then we'll open it up. Possibly our fourth panelist, Kashara White, will join us soon. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Derek.
I love to have had this opportunity to, to show, to talk about this struggle here, and especially when you got to take your whole life in account. I don't just think I just have my daily life, it's just my whole life in account as far as what you do like every day. So I think coming to this school, the free school, for about a year, it's probably was a part of my heritage that I just supposed to be here in this school. So the Church of the Advocate was always a center in our whole community. So just coming here for my first time, sitting with Tony and a lot of the class, that was the fellowship. It was just the church. That was the fellowship. But I love that coming to the school, we was addressing all these real critical books. And I'm a person that keep all the critical books, so it makes a better expression for yourself just to have the whole class reading together, not just a single individual. So this kind of coming to the school here every Saturday, it kind of keeps that spirit in you that keeps you marshaled for our community, because our community really need all the love and kindness and the care so that we don't walk off from this principle. That I feel blessed to be able to talk and be around young people and to see the heart of our real nation, represented in this church. And it don't need a million people, just need us, to make this time count. So I believe the free school gives us a day that we come in the morning time faithfully and give ourselves some devotion about this school, because it might not be anything else like it globally unless we make an account that we are doing the global need. So all the communities worldwide need our global need. So, for us to be here so that we can be really counted on. That way we have a principle of, that gets you up in the morning. You might not want to get up, but I've been doing this for like my whole life. This has been a life mission. So I started out in high school, but I think I started out before that, just to say that, you can hear that call in your ear sometimes. You get up in the morning like, come on, we got something to do in this school here. And all of us old heads is not all old and burned out. We really running the race. So we need to be here for each other in this school and come here dedicated. Bring your books. Bring the things that you have already, because I know everybody in this room has inherited something for this school. Engineers, architects, designers, it's parents. I'm a parent, I'm a grandparent too. So all of us got some tools, and we need these tools for this school. And we really blessed that we're in Church of the Advocate, because this is the real sanctuary for Philadelphia. Nothing gonna happen in Philadelphia unless it comes from this point. And we might be a modest amount, but people will eventually come, like I did, and say, this is some serious business. I respect Tony, I respect him as being a professor, because I love that relationship of having older people you respect, because I have always given my respect to people that have been my mentors, men and women, more women than men, because they were being real. So they tried to give me that real impression. So we need that. We need to keep the encouragement, because I feel encouraged by all the people that I encounter here. It's the future encouragement, because if you don't have that future encouragement, we're not going to live to win. And I'm willing to win. And whatever costs and whatever it takes and whatever desire, you got to have devotion and desire. That way you won't give up in the first fight. We done been in a lot of fights here in Philadelphia, but a lot of people might not have grown up in our neighborhoods and make tough human beings. But at least I know when we're being made tough, we're being made tough to come to this school and to keep this focus alive and keep what we're doing as part of our whole dream. I always loved Che Guevara. I don't have to carry hand grenades, but I love Che Guevara because he had the kindness, not just being a doctor, but he was willing to go anywhere in the world for the spirit of this whole mission to win, to be of value. He didn't want to treat another human being without value. So we don't walk past each other and say, they do matter. People matter. We are valuable for I call it the whole chain. We don't have a little chain, we got a huge world chain. And this group and coming here to this conference, this really represents the global chain, and I call it the consciousness that needs to be disseminated and make sure people have this foundation. And I won't say any more after this. And peace.
I'm a mobile speaker. I like to move around a little bit. So, excuse me. How's everybody doing? Awesome. I want to thank Dr. Montero for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this free school community. A lot of my experience with, being involved in translating a lot of my ideas about the world really came to fruition with the free school. It clarified a lot of things, and it really is like a guideway for me to, pursue other things in a principled and very thorough way. So I want to thank Dr. Montero for allowing that to occur within me. That's a personal thing, so I think he deserves a round of applause anyway. I got the prompt for this from Facebook Messenger. It's notoriously shaky with me. I hate it. But I want to start off by a quote from a guy that I've always admired, and his name is Fred Hampton. I don't know if everyone is familiar with Chairman Fred of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Fred Hampton was a very, very young guy. He was pretty much a supernova. If you have the opportunity, I check out YouTube and some of his speeches, and the way he just is able to tap into people and their energy is amazing. And he has this quote, and I feel like it's really appropriate, and it ties a lot of things together. He says, "Let me give you an example of teaching. Basically, the way people learn is through doing." That's very simple, right? Learning by doing. The most empowering thing is to be able to feel like you have ownership over what you've learned. And when you say you have ownership, that means that you're able to utilize it in the best way that you see fit, right? So ownership means that's an investment, and that investment is continual. You're going to learn, you're going to build on it, and you're going to find people who help sharpen that, as the Bible would say, not to get religious, as iron sharpens iron. You're going to find people who sharpen your iron, and you're going to refine that. And that's going to be a guide point to other people, you know what I mean? Because one thing that I feel like that we have lost and I think that the free school does a really good job of focusing, is that the people have the answers already. They live and understand intrinsically what the oppression is, right? So what Fred was able to do is he was able to harness that. He was able to harness that intrinsic understanding and be able to operationalize it, if you will, to use it to a practical end, to feed people, to take care of their needs, to address their needs. We often have this concept of knowledge as being something that we can commodify. You know, a lot of our parents who, you know, my parents particularly, I'm working class black parents who, you know, had the opportunity to be in the middle class because in the 70s there were opportunities for black people to enter civil service and really have a gainful life. You know, believe that knowledge was something that was a very narrow thing that you could commodify for a job. But that runs counter to how communities work, because knowledge is a circular proposition. That implies that in order for you to be able to repeat something and to reproduce something, you have to imbibe it first, right? So, personal story about me. I'm in social work. So I work around this neighborhood, and I work a little bit up on Erie Avenue. And a lot of the kids that I work with are angry, and they fight every day. And so they're trained to meet these impulses that usually work themselves out through fighting or insults. That's a currency. That's something that they've learned. That's a negative behavior that's been learned, that's been taught, that's been reinforced, right? So that knowledge isn't there. But one of my presence in that classroom and one of my duties in that classroom, I feel like, is to allow them to know that they are important. And that I take every opportunity to be like, you know what, I learn from you just as well as you learn from me. Because they have this idea that I know everything. And I'm like, I don't know everything. In fact, I've learned 2 or 3 things from you that I've communicated to my friends and in my environment. And when I tell them that, they be like, really, Mr. Mark? You learned something from me? And I was like, yo, I learned something from you all the time. When I'm sitting back and I'm watching you, I'm learning from you. I'm learning from your experience because I feel like you have an incredible amount to teach me. And no adult, particularly in an urban school like Meade, that's run down, that needs probably much in excess of $300K in repairs, they don't get that. That's not something they get. An adult coming in and saying to them, I learned from you. And that's an incredibly empowering feeling when someone feels like they have ownership over what they've learned and they're able to share it. And in social work, we have this thing, it's called transfer of skill. So basically, it's this demonstrable index to let them know that, okay, all these theoretical propositions about how human behavior work, you're going to try to intervene in them, and you're going to see if they have any desirable effects, right? So transfer of skill. And so I saw the transfer of skill with another student. His name is Ramir. He's always in the back in the classroom, and he's reading all the time, and he doesn't take his hood off because he's insecure about his hair. And actually had an incident with the school police one time that I felt really compelled to mediate, where the cop pulled his hood off, and I had to talk to the principal about that. But that's a personal story. But he's always reading, and he says, and he's teaching another kid about something that he sees in the map, because Ramir loves geography, and I tell him about all the places I've been and the little stories, and he's interested in it. And he's teaching other kids about it. And I was like, that's a transfer of skill. And they'd be like, why do you know this? Like, Mr. Mark was talking about it. And that's the point. Take it out of the university. Take it out of the whole structure of I'm this, I'm that, this degree, that degree. Because as Asada Shakur said, no one is going to educate you to overthrow them. So when we think about the neoliberal university and we think about what constitutes knowledge and how knowledge is valued and how certain knowledge is privileged over other knowledge, the knowledge of my children is easily, I call them my children, I don't have children of my own, but the children I work with is easily discarded by the administration that works in that school, that doesn't feel like they have anything to give, but feels like that they needed to be addressed to and dictated to and not in conversation with. And that's the important part, Because as revolutionaries, we understand that each and every person has an intrinsic value, and that's something that we can learn from. We are all jigsaw puzzles, in a sense that they're tiny little pieces that create us in completion. And none of those pieces are gathered on our own. They come to us by various means. Either we learn, we interact, we're hurt, we give, or whatever. But it still comes to us, and it constitutes the entirety of who we are. And a lot of that is informed by knowledge. And I feel like when it comes to our community, and particularly the black proletariat, and I'm going to wrap it up with this, and Baldwin too, because I want to read something I feel like he's really appropriate, because we study James Baldwin, and James Baldwin is really critical to understanding the intrinsic value of people and how people understand and the intrinsic value of self and community, and it's very important. I feel like the black proletariat in the city, when I say proletariat, that means working people who contribute to these communities, who keep it afloat, the people who do the work. As my friend would say, quiet work. We have this thing called quiet work. That means that you're doing the work, you're laying the foundation. You're not telling people, but it's those efforts that sustain and continue to keep up the appearance of survival. And survival is not an appearance, because that would cheapen the daily experience of what these people go through. When I say quiet work, when working class, I mean mothers, and I mean uncles, and I mean grandparents, and I mean situations that are contingent, because a lot of these kids live in contingent situations. And when we talk about community revolution and we talk about outreach, it has to start with them. The quiet work of the parents who still raise their kids and who still do the work in spite of the material conditions, and who still seek to understand, and who still seek to go against the paradigm of this is how things are. Education is a really subjective thing in these day and age. A society that really valued the impact of education wouldn't entertain a concept like alternate facts. So this is what we're dealing with. And when we understand that there's intrinsic value in the people, and we understand that when we talk about the black proletariat, I'm not racializing it. I'm saying that a lot of the efforts, particularly in the city of Philadelphia, the stories that I've heard and the experience that I've lived is so rich. There's so much to tap into. There's still so much community there. There's still so much that is resistant. There's still so much that is attractive. That's why hip-hop is an appropriate form. It is, I feel, the most direct form, and it touches people. And the older people understand that. I was talking with Munchie on the bench, and he was talking about how hip-hop was really, really influential in the gym, and he was saying how these young people really get off on this stuff, and I'm like, that's the point. How can our art be revolutionary? How can it be experiential? How can we teach people? How can we invest the idea that the knowledge that you gain is your own, and you have to use that responsibly? It's not something that you can commodify by sitting in a classroom for a very narrow end that usually ends up not satisfying those individual needs, because as human beings, we are intrinsically collective. There is a reason why we create and have the ultimate impulse. I stopped rapping for 7 years, personally. It was just something that I felt like I was done with. But it brought me back, because I realized that the most important outlet for this gift was sharing with people, and sharing that and finding that liberation. You know what I mean? I want to read real quick, and I don't want to take up any more time, because I can talk all day. Oh, yeah. I want to read this last bit. If that's okay, that's fine. I don't know. This is from The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. And we've been reading a lot of James Baldwin. And this passage stuck with me because I feel like a lot of the concepts around liberation are about, education and how that process leads you on continual to self-discovery, which is exhausting, but either way, it's still very gratifying. It's on 120, sorry. I'll write some quiet. He says, freedom is hard to bear. It can be objected that I am speaking of political freedom in spiritual terms, But the political institutions of any nation are always menaced and are ultimately controlled by the spiritual state of the nation. We are controlled here by our confusion far more than we know. And the American dream has therefore become something much more closely resembling a nightmare. On the private, domestic, and international levels, sorry, I thought that was a period there. Privately, we cannot stand our lives and dare not examine them. Domestically, we take no responsibility for and no pride in what goes in our country. And internationally, for many millions of people, we are a mitigated disaster. And I'm saying that is that as revolutionaries, we need to educate people ultimately about the contradictions. We need to meet their needs and we need to value them as people. Because confusion exists when people are in search of answers. And the ruling class is not going to give you those answers. And so as revolutionaries, we need to seek love first and foremost. And knowledge and everything else ensues from that. So with that, I thank you for allowing me to speak and tangle this microphone around this cord like this. Thank you. You guys are beautiful.
I can't believe Tony got me up here doing this stuff. I ain't never in my life spoke like this. I was the guy, and when I was in school, yeah, I was real good behavior with the teachers. And I was always sit in the back. In those days, you'd have to come up to the front to read. And every time they called on me, everybody would start laughing because I was dyslexic and I couldn't talk well. And I hated it. And I was nice in school, yes ma'am, no ma'am. We had nuns in my earlier days. And I hated school. It was a big drag. And when I got a little older, it was just some place to get dressed up and go. But I felt love at home. My mother was a teacher. She taught for 50 years. And actually, she graduated from University of Pennsylvania in 1943. My brother had got the brains. But I came at home with a lot of love. I grew up. I ended up in the Navy Yard, so that gave me the ability to travel. And this was in the heart of Vietnam. So I went to Guam in 1970 and went back again, and then went to Seattle, Washington, all your big ports in the country. I made the rounds, you know, and it taught me about life. I've always been a revolutionary. I hate bullies. I've always hated them, ever since I was a little kid. A light bulb went off in my head. In those days, we used to have to, on Saturdays, we'd get up and go get a junk, and go junking. You had junk places where you go, and coal. People used to heat their homes with coal. And we'd go get the coal and sort it out. And you know how these boys would always come up and try to take your little lunch money and stuff like that. I was very young, and I said, I'm not going to stand for this. And I was just blessed. I grew up on a block with a lot of prize fighters. And I admired them guys. I didn't know who they were at the time. I was really young. It was a gym called the Olympia. It was on Broad Street at the time. So I started going down there and got beat up and then didn't go back for a little while. But I fell in love with it. And I went back. And I was literally around some world champions that I knew. Some of them guys I started out with. You know, I didn't do good like I should have because I didn't really put my mind into it. Then when I was 23 or 24, something happened to me and that led me in the street. And the streets ate me up. But I always had a compassion for people. I used to hate my mother like that. 'Cause my mother used to say, Munchie, don't fight. Talk your troubles out. Y'all can talk. You couldn't do that, man. Not when I was coming up. You could, you know what I mean? And I always tell people today, I said, I've never had a bully in my life take his hands out of my pocket because I said, come on, don't do that. That's not nice. It's not nice. Don't do that. And I worked 27 years on one job and 20 on this one. I never went on that job and had anybody disrespect me. I say, don't talk to me like that. That's not nice. You got to put your foot in people's asses. I shouldn't talk like that to church. But I've always had compassion for people. I've never liked, when I saw or didn't know what it was, the Irish thing over there. And I was blessed. I worked at a place called Lakehurst, New Jersey. It's still there. It was the base up there, and we worked up there. And this guy who took time with me, his name was Tom Walsh. If he's alive now, he got to be in his late 80s. But I was a painter, and he took the time to show me how to mix paint, mix colors. But how he got in this country was during the Korean War. And he came from Ireland here, and he hated the British, hated them with a passion. And when he told me what happened to him over there, like he literally was eating potatoes and stuff. And the British killed his brother and all that. And he said when he came here, he ended up in Harlem. And he related to those people. And he said, I'll never forget him telling me when he heard Martin Luther King's speech, I had a dream. He said he had to pull over and cry because he felt that. And anybody who's going through that. And like I knew Vietnam was wrong. I didn't nobody tell me that. You could look and see what was going on. In those days, the bodies and people being burnt alive and all that. I mean, it's just uncalled for. So when I met Tony, I've been coming to the Saturday school now, I guess, since we've been here, at here, a couple of years, about 3 or 4 years. And I never dreamed that something would grab me like this. Me and my friend, we was in the Temple of the Black Messiah, and I met Tony, I think, through a group that Rob Gray has. And that's how I met him. But Saturdays was always my day. Saturdays is the day that I got up, and I still go to the gym. My granddaughter told me to stop wearing my hat backwards and go to the gym all the time because I think I'm young. But I stopped wearing hat backwards. But I would get up and I'd go work out. I've been doing yoga and do that, and then go get a sauna bath, and go get a good rub down. I never thought that something like this would grab me, but I really look forward to coming here. I'm a person who believes that it collectively, and it's about love. You know, if you talk all the revolutionary people who ever lived, and I was always a fan of Fidel Castro. Anybody that stands up, anybody that knows the word no, I've always felt as though I don't think anybody has a right to mistreat you, make fun of you. I've always thought that it just never set right with me. I grew up in the church. I love the fact that when what's name turned around and made everybody shake hands, because that's the church I came out of. You know what I mean? And I'm a little nervous, man. I can't believe this, but it's just that. Yeah, well, Tony made me more of a big fighter than what I was, you know. But the thing that I found with the Saturday school is it's just the minds here. You know, when I was young, a guy one time, I asked this guy, I said, why are you still coming here, man? Like, why do you come down? He used to watch us come down to the gym, watch us beat each other up. He said, y'all keep me young. And I never understood that. Now I understand what he's talking about. Because the young guys keep me young, and the new ideas that I hear here keep me young. A lot of things we say here on a Saturday, Monday is in the papers. You know, this has more so turned over now. Almost what's the word, Tony? We used. We were talking about. It's more not just with the Du Bois and all these people and the people that we read. It's almost like a therapeutic thing for me. It helps me out to know that people are not just standing still. And this thing, what we do here is being done, hopefully, in different parts of the earth. I think that it's so part of my life that I can't tell you what you people mean to me to come here and see you every Saturday. And I look forward to that, you know. But I'm about done now, so.
If you've never been to the Saturday Free School, you'll understand what Susan Abuhawa says when she says it's a healing space. And already this conference has begun that healing, and it happens every Saturday. And you know, as we say, revolution will heal you of a lot of your problems. Yeah, more than a therapist. And I'm not telling nobody to get off their medication, but but you know, I think there's something about ideological clarity that can help people in ways that a society that alienates, oppresses, and lies to them continually keeps them in confusion. But we want to open it up. But first I want to ask Munchie a question. You know, when we started Baldwin this time again, Munchie, I remember you saying that the thing you liked about Baldwin is that he didn't go to college. Could you just elaborate upon that? Hold on, let me give you the microphone.
I've always been an admirer of self-taught people, this is my opinion. I think that you're born that way. Something happens in that sperm. When that sperm hit that egg, and you come here, and the Creator, God brings you. I think that he was just born to do it. He was just born to do what he did. I think that his intelligence, probably if he had went to college, he might not have been that type of man. You know, I used to think that going to college was everything. I really thought that when you went to college, you had to be smart. I didn't know how dumb you can be till I got here to Saturday school. Or I shouldn't say dumb, how your thinking could be. You know what I mean? I used to think that was so fabulous that you had a doctor's degree and you was this and you were working on this and that. But I think Baldwin was better because he was of the people, and he hadn't been tainted yet. And I think it shows in his work and how he felt, plus his love for his people, love for humanity. He just didn't love. He was a little guy who was as small as he was, and he was gay. And then when I was coming up, you didn't spouse those things. For him to be that, and he was a man's man. He wasn't afraid of anything, and that's special.
Nanditha, what does our time look like? But while she's going to find that out, I want to ask Derek a question, if you don't mind. Derek is from that part of North Philadelphia we call the Brickyard.
I live West Oak Lane, Germantown.
Okay, all right. Okay, he's a little bit further up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that you often talk about in the free school is the gang life. And a lot of the brothers that you came up with, y'all went through different things, the Panthers, the Palestinians, the Nation of Islam, and a lot of those brothers are no longer with us. I'd just like to ask you if you could, reflect upon what is it that has sustained you? Is it your books? Is it the art that you do? Is it the music that you create? What is it that has sustained you when others fell in the course of life?
I would say it's probably my inner faith of it's my faith in humanity. My faith in humanity is really tremendous. Even when somebody might say, why? And I say, my faith in humanity is really something that's holding me up every day. So I don't really leave out the house and get up in the morning without that. It's a sincerity. When you have sincerity and nothing can get you down. And I'm sincere on this path, no matter how tough, and it is tough. It is not easy. I would say one thing. I'll park my car. I'll walk blocks if I didn't have a car, but I would sit in my neighborhood with all the people I grew up with. If I named all their names, I'd be like, wow. But I can hear them saying, Crab going to carry them books, and he got that stick he carry, and it means something for our neighborhood and my greater neighborhood, because there ain't no one neighborhood I belong to. There's like about 5 neighborhoods in Germantown, West Oak Lane, that make up those greater gangs of the whole Germantown, and West Oak Lane included. And this is a lot of people, a lot of brothers and sisters. But we have had remarkable people that would come through gang war and just say, look, gang, come here. I want to talk to you. I'd be like, why you got to stop me? But people would stop me dead in my tracks and pull me to the side. Sisters, and so that I would be on this path. Because if I didn't, I would be one of those ones that the Lord didn't taking you home already. And I'm reminded every day that, don't take this for granted. You know what I mean? I put my trust in humanity that we not in a losing battle. We just taking back and winning back things that are part of humanity. We're not fighting over something that somebody already did, is destroying every day. So if we are comforted, just put that sense of humanity in, just keep that, because that's the thing that they seek out to destroy. And coming here, boy, my guys, meeting Tony, this reaffirmed that this revolution been going on since I was in high school and before I entered into it. So coming here to the free school, all it did is reaffirm that I've stayed on my study path, and this is real evidence of all the people I met in the free school, all the lovely people and beautiful people here. And this is tremendous. So I'm my little reservoir, and I'm reaching over to other brothers and sisters that have that reservoir, and I'm like, I appreciate it. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Just how much minute? 25 minutes. Oh, okay. I'm just going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up for the audience. You know, Mark, like you mentioned, that you don't have any children of your own, but often you have told us that, well, I couldn't make it this Saturday because I was helping with my nephew. And, you know, this idea of family as bigger than just my children, but it's my children and everybody else's children. And I would like for you, if you might, to relate that concept of family to the struggle for revolutionary consciousness and for, as Derek said, the fight for humanity.
Well, I mean, I think family in a literal sense is important, and in a metaphorical sense, when I say metaphorical, that's applied to the community, is very important. One of the things that animates community, I feel like, and develops cohesiveness is empathy, right? So one of the things my kids, and I want to directly relate, I say my kids, like I said, I don't have kids, you know that. Relate back is that they grew up with each other. So whether they're on different ends of the spectrum, because it's usually prey and predator, so like usually that type of relationship enforces itself. No matter what end of the spectrum they're on, they realize that they're in a struggle. So there's this acute awareness that there is a struggle, right? And it's born out in the youngest of them. And one of the things that the neoliberal structure has done a really adroit and adept job at doing is really instilling individuality in African American and Black communities in inner cities. And I say this with some evidence towards history. One of the things that allowed those early Panther groups to be so cohesive was the fact that everyone knew each other and everyone had an understanding, an intimate understanding of what life was like. And so therefore they could develop a consensus about what the needs were and how to address them. And I hate to use this cliche because, people say it all the time, but it's true. There's a virtual crab in the barrel mentality. So there's this aspirationalism of, I'm trying to get out, right? And so intending to I'm trying to get out means that I invest less and less and less in affirming the people who don't have that opportunity. So there's this vacuum. There's this continuous vacuum. And so the concept of family in a way, and from my personal observation, gets distorted. And it usually manifests it's there, but it's distorted, and it continuously reaffirms negativity. So the concept of family means that, when I said, it's like bringing it back, and then knowing that each and every individual is a part of a community, and each and every individual in that community provides value. So it's a circular. A circular, like, give it out, circular. Coupons, get it? Circular. So it's circular in a sense that a circle is different from a line because a circle has mobility. A line goes up, you know what I mean? You can say geometrically which one is better, a circle or a line, but a circle has a value. So that means that everything that occurs within that circle is mutually reinforcing, whether that be positivity or negativity. It's mutually reinforcing. And so the idea of family means is that positive family means you have value. And I really tried to inject that into those kids, where I was a stranger, and a lot of those kids said really nasty things to me, and I didn't let that deter me from making those connections, because that's what they're used to, that defensiveness. You know what I mean? Like, this whole society sells us on what the idea of family is. It's very parochial. It leads towards really specious ends that end up glorifying capitalistic results. And so like I said, the poor, working class people have that already. You still see vestiges of it. I'm not going to make that statement writ large and say that that quality and that tendency is gone. But I'm saying is that a lot of the reinforcing values of the media and a lot of the reinforcing values of the city, and this is attributable to the black misleadership class who often interfaces, because they come to these schools, it's very individualistic. You work hard and get an education, and maybe you can get a good job. And so it was this rote message of individualized outcomes that really destroys the concept of family and really destroys the whole concept of mutuality. And mutuality is where solidarity is grown. So, unless you have that principle mutuality that has developed in the past organically, when you see with the Panthers and you see here, if something comes in between that, you start seeing those dysfunctions. So the family is very important. And, family means you share ideals as well as you share spaces and materials. So I think part of the work is really stressing to people, who are downtrodden, that we are family. Like, there's people who sleep under the convention center, and there's like 4 or 5 of them. Like, I take food out of my girlfriend's house and I give them to them. And I got in trouble for this because, those Nutri-Grain bars were her roommates. And so, but I was giving them to this man, and he would talk to me, and he would tell me about, how, the factory, he used to work at the Bud factory, which made passenger cars, and I'm, obsessed with trains. And so we had this dialogue, and that's what's revolutionary about it. If you have it, share it. You create mutuality in the untouchables, because that's what Jesus was about. That's true revolutionary. And that's not something that you can only find exclusively through Christianity. That's something that is born out through the common sense of the soul. And this society really suppresses the common sense of the soul.
Before I turn the mic over to the audience for questions, I'd like to just acknowledge 2 people who were part of the Saturday Free School from the very beginning, and I just want them to stand up. Cassandra Flanagan and Patrice Armstead. Would you all sisters stand up? Yeah. They were with us when we started at Temple University, and then when, the doors there were closed, they were with us when we came over here to the Church of the Advocate. And Cassandra Flanagan and another sister by the name of Ada Don Martin, she'll be here later. I remember when they came to my house and they said, look, we have to restart the Saturday Free School. And, I was feeling a certain way about it, and they said, no, we have to do it. And I said, well, what do y'all want to study? And they said, well, we want to start with philosophy. And in particular, now this is deeper than deep, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. And we did it, and it was that foundation and that belief that something like this was possible. And if we were consistent, we could actually build among people and among the working people and the poor. Okay, having said that, are there any questions from the audience? And if you do, would you just come up front? Is there anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Yes, come on down, Osaze.
When children have emotional and behavior problems because they can't read, how did you handle that? What did you do? Because I used to struggle with that.
That's a very,
A lot of problems around children in the classroom when they can't read.
that's a very specific question, yeah.
So they do a distraction thing, they act out, they start, just so that they don't have to read.
Yeah. I have to be really honest with you, and this is something that I've really given a lot of thought to, and how to, remedy this and work with people in this direction, because personally, I do know 3 or 4 people who don't know how to read. And one of the things that drew them to me was the fact that they said they felt comfortable with me, and they knew I was always reading things, and they were impressed with the way I talked. And so one person told me, like, you know what, I can't, I really, honestly, I don't, excuse my language, I don't fuck with books. That's what he said. I'm quoting, I don't fuck with books. And I was like, I can understand, because all of that has been held out as distant from their experience, and that's really by design. And I would say from the personal perspective, there's a psychological barrier that, particularly if you're older, over the age of 10 or 12, because the school district, and I feel in my personal opinion, acquiesces and passes along a lot of behaviors that, they really don't highlight kids' needs. And so you can really get away with being marginally or illiterate in school. You can really get away with it. And when it gets older, it really does put a dent in your pride. And I feel like one of the ways to address that, and there's a lot of strategic and didactic approaches to address that are very technical that I can't really get into. But I think preliminarily, I think you really need to address, confidence. You know what I'm saying? I feel like the society is uniquely constructed to, take stabs at an individual's confidence at every point and direction, and that dissuades a lot of people. And then there's the people that get through because they have talent, and like Munchie said, they have unique gifts, and they can intuit. Reading was something that wasn't really encouraged in the school I went to. I just wanted to know things, and my mom couldn't answer all of my questions, so I was self-propelled to learn on my own because I wanted to answer my own questions, and I had my mom yell at me, saying, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But that has to also be fostered, too. That spirit of inquisitiveness is deliberately, destroyed in urban communities. And the school district isn't going to foster that because, as Baldwin says, if you are uniquely aware of your condition, you are no longer a victim because you can operationalize a response. That's paraphrasing it, but they're not going to, do that. So it's a confidence thing, and it's also a practicality thing of doing it in a really friendly and principled way, and be like, listen, all these things is through books. So that's a whole process, but I'd argue confidence would be a first place to start, particularly someone who's older. I see this as I don't feel qualified. I'm not a reading specialist. I feel like when you're younger, it's different. It's more technical, but when you're older, it's a lot more of a confidence issue. And I feel like a lot of these programs need to be addressed around making a comfortable and mutual environment for people who have needs. I feel like that's already a paradigm that's in operation now, but it just needs to be more effort on that. So.
Kashara White just came in, and I want to just introduce her appropriately. When she was a freshman at Temple University, she was my student, and she, in some ways, is very different now than she was then. At least she looks different in the sense of the way she cares for her hair and respects her natural hair. Kashara's from Strawberry Mansion, which is a very important part of North Philadelphia. And she's been a political activist ever since she was young. She was a part of the movement for my reinstatement at Temple, in fact, a leader of it. She was targeted by the people who now run the African American Studies because of her boldness and principledness. Kashara was initially a major in history, but changed her major because history did not answer the problems that she came to Temple to have answered. So she came into African American Studies. And when it was totally upset and turned into what is in effect, a shell and a fraud, I think you're back to history now, right? She went back to history, at least to get something out of it. But Kashara White's vision, I'll end on this, has been to establish a radical philosophy summer camp for kids 12 to 18 in North Philadelphia, because she said she's tired of working with college students, and she feels that junior high and high school students are the most radical. So without saying more, I just want to bring Kashara White to speak for about 12 minutes.
Thank you, guys. Peace, everybody. I didn't really think I was going to be speaking this long, so we see what happens. Yeah, okay, so I just want to start off by saying that the Free Saturday School came out of a material need. There was a void in African American studies and really in all the humanities disciplines at Temple University, and then you see a lot of students coming from Penn and even CCP to the Free Saturday School, and it's really because there's a void there. There's no radical political education, and I can really just speak on what's happening at Temple. So as a freshman, and I was in education history because I want to teach people, and I really hated the education school because they all they promote going into poor neighborhoods and particularly black communities to almost get good at teaching and then move on to a better, higher, age or whatever. So I really hated the education school. One of my teachers, my first professor, she's a graduate student, and she was a teacher in the Chicago Public School District for 4 years, right? And so she thought that she knew everything there was to know about teaching me about working in an urban school. Little does she know I came from an urban school. I live in an urban environment. It's not foreign to me, but in the same way it is to her. And I think that being in the education school really opened my eyes to the idea of what a career really is, what your career is really contributing to, because it's the first time I really noticed that this isn't really about helping kids, because everybody talks about helping kids in education, right? You help kids, you teach them how to read so that they can build a life for themselves in the future. But that's not really what it's about. You go and you basically learn how to finesse more money out of a position at a school. That's really what it is. And so I'm dealing with that, coupled with dealing with history professors who say things like, oh, he was a man of his time, and just dumb stuff like that history people do. And so I went to African American Studies thinking that I was gonna get something different. And Dr. Montero's class was the class to take. Everybody was saying, take Montero's class or you're not gonna just take Montero's class, you have to. And so it was all upperclassmen, and I was a sophomore. And so I knew Dr. Montero's class was the class to get because the first time I tried to take it, it was full like that in 5 minutes. Everybody got his class and I couldn't get in. And so the next semester I stayed up so I could get into the class because, Temple, if you guys go to Temple, you have to stay up to try to get classes. So at midnight, the classes become available and then everybody jumps in to try to get them. And that's kind of problematic in and of itself when you think about education and the way that it's supposed to be accessible and work for people. So in African American Studies, I took Dr. Montero's class, and in taking his class, I noticed that the ideas that were being fostered and being developed there were being attacked. So as a student, I didn't really think the ideas were something to be attacked. I thought that this was a free space where people could just think what they think and, work it out amongst themselves. But apparently administrators don't like if you talk about communism. They don't appreciate if you actually deal with dichotomies that have to do with the different ideologies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and actually deal with the differences in their ideologies, not just, pin them against each other ahistorically, the way that they tend to do, to create like a particular narrative. And I think that that's what Dr. Montero was trying to, and all the students were all trying to break down those narratives, because in history you don't really get like facts, you get like a narrative. Like Lincoln freed the slaves, that's the narrative. And so then they take facts to try to corroborate that narrative. So you don't just get what happened, why does it matter, and that's what we're trying to figure out. I think that when you look at the void that existed in African American studies in particular, the void that was there was an issue of non-resistance. So the people were talking about, Harriet Tubman or I.W. Wells, and they're saying all these great things that these people have done, but when you talk about I.W. Wells, you focus on her research. Only talk about her research and her journalism, and look at all the things that she accomplished through research. But you don't talk about the fact that I.W. Wells was armed, like, all the time. You don't talk about the fact that she, like she was a real resistor. And I think that that's what separates what was happening in the philosophy circle, that's what we're calling it, and what was happening in AFAM. Not only that, but the focus was on culture. It was all about black culture. And a lot of that a lot of the idea of culture can begin to explain away oppression, right? So you say, oh, well, black people or Africans are naturally, or they culturally work together. Africans are culturally communal. And then you get to explain away the dependency black working people in the United States or in the Caribbean or wherever, that dependency that they have on each other, that they need each other in order to survive as working people. You miss that part because you're too busy looking at how culturally Africans are communal and we work together and we like to live 25 in one house or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And so that's when it becomes very problematic, because they don't focus on the oppression or the power dynamics. It's completely about culture. And just to talk about power dynamics and culture, like a lot of times it was presented that culturally, African people have the man as the head of the household and the woman, and it's not about patriarchy, it's just about the division of labor. This is what they say. Like, they really teach this in school. It's about division of labor, but completely ignoring that one form of labor is valued over another. If you say it's about division of labor and men go to war because women have to take care of the village or whatever, then you have to acknowledge that going to war is valued and taking care of the village is devalued. And when women and queer people are in class hearing that women knew their place in pre-colonial Africa and there was no homosexuality, you see that there's a void for actual education, actual learning, and actual radical spaces. And these people are actually putting themselves in front of students as if they're radical. They're projecting and presenting it. And I don't want to judge other groups because that's but y'all know the black Israelite bulls that be out on the street screaming? They are very similar to them in the way they fashion themselves as radical and doing something against the grain and against the system, right? But they're actually inactive. Y'all never seen black Israelites handing no homeless people sandwiches, did y'all? No, because they don't do anything for anybody. They just go around hating. And so what the people at AFAM did was they tried to present, instead of a position of hate, they tried to present it as a position of love. Like, we love ourselves, we love our Africanness, we love our black hair, we love our Adinkra symbols, and not really actually love the people in Norris Homes that was literally in their shadows. In the shadows of Gladfelter Hall is Norris Homes, and the students were discouraged from going there. And when we weren't discouraged, there was bureaucratic sort of, oh, we'll get to that later kind of stuff. And that's just how they do you in academia. So we got the philosophy circle because the Dr. Montero's students in his AFAM class, was it Intro to African American Studies? Black social and political thought, and we were, the class was like 3 hours, but that wasn't enough time, so we just kept it going, and like we would, Sarah would come up and try to get space for us because eventually Doc, he got banned from getting classrooms, and so SJP has always been really instrumental in the just the foundation of this organization. They were the people who rented rooms for the philosophy circle when Doc was unable to rent rooms because Sarah Giskin, she was like their event planner or something like that. And so we were able to rent rooms, and the thing about the philosophy circle that was different from the spaces in AFAM were, well, the acknowledgement of power, the acknowledgement of oppression and prejudice. Like, it's not just about people, you know, being different from you and being afraid of difference, but it's really about people utilizing those differences to oppress other people, right? And so another thing was that there were real radical people in the space. Like, real Black Panthers came to visit us and talk to us as students, and real people from the MOVE organization. And like, that was, as a student, it's easy for these folks who are, you know, just dashiki'd out with the, you know what I'm saying? And it's easy for them to capture young people into making them feel accepted and wanted, especially when whiteness is everywhere. And it's always portrayed as better than you, right? So all these people with the dashikis and the hair and everything, they're coming to you and embracing you, but they're not embracing us wholly. They're not embracing the queer students. They're definitely not embracing women. And so I think that one of the things that I remember as maybe like one of the first times or that I went to the philosophy circle, Pam Africa was there. And she was like, oh, I'm just here to learn from you guys. And I'm like, what? Like, and so, yeah, and she told us like the story, but she said it like so nonchalant. And like these people in AFAM, they tell stories, but they make them epic, right? They make them these grand, you know, this grand tale of how Harriet Tubman freed the slaves, right? They make them very epic, but she's telling me a story about how her boyfriend's getting beat up by these cops, and she's thinking in her head, oh, if I don't do something, then they're gonna kill him. So she jumps on top of him. Mind you, in my head, it's like, girl, how is that your logical conclusion? Like, but she jumps on top of him, saving her boyfriend's life, and she's just talking about it like it's like nothing. Like, yeah, and then those stupid cops, and then, you know, like it's nothing. And I'm just like, this woman is so amazing. I can't believe it. And I just remember, like, me and my friends just talking about all night long how amazing Pam Africa is, how smart and intelligent, like, all these Black Panthers and all these radicals and just people from North Philly, people from West Philly, just regular everyday people. People were bringing their children, and it was a space that it was an alternative space for us, a space where we could really grow. And I just want to point out that the students who are in the philosophy circle, however different their politics might be from that point, they're still doing work. They're still activists. They're still, you know, whether it's 15 now or whatever it might be, they're still out here. But I never, ever, ever have seen a day in my life anybody from the African American Studies department in North Philly, never. Or West Philly for that matter. And West Philly is where the activists go. That's where it's popping at. That's where all the young, you know, that's really where the hippies are. Like, so I just think that it's really interesting to see how different the people who had joined the philosophy circle, which would later become the Free Saturday School. And the reason why we switched to Saturdays was because we were completely knocked off campus. They would not have us, and the Church of the Advocate opened their arms to us, and we're forever indebted because this is really going to keep going. Everybody in the Free Saturday School, when I talk to them, they're like, oh, well, if I move, I'm going to start it where I'm at. Like, if I want to do one, I want this to be everywhere. And so I think that that's really what our goal is to create an education, a system of education that is for working people in their interests, not in the interests of the ruling class. Because when you go to school and you're a black kid and you learn Lincoln freed the slaves, that's not in your interests. So another part of that is breaking intergenerational ties, because you can't just teach young people history and teach all of them like, oh, well, no, you freed yourselves. Lincoln didn't free the slaves. Meanwhile, all their elders think that Lincoln freed the slaves. You can't, like, how are they supposed to communicate? How are they supposed to uplift each other and get through it? And I think that one of the best things about the Free Saturday School is that we can come, and it could be the youngest to the oldest, the most prestigious PhD having person to the didn't graduate high school, dropped out in 7th grade person, and everybody is equal. Everybody's input is valued, and I just think that it's an education process that's healthy, and you know, it's not a place where you have to hear. Well, you have to confront things about society and therefore things about yourself that are damaging and oppressive, but you don't have to do that in a way that's damaging to you and who you are. And so I think that when you, that difference, that shift from being in an AFM class and somebody literally telling you, oh, women knew their place in Africa, like, and it's, mind you, black man in the front of class, all black women in the class, one white man. Women knew their place in Africa. What? Why? What? Who is this for? Like, who? So I think that, I'm wrapping up, and you guys can ask me questions, but yeah, I just think that the alternative space that the Free Saturday School provides is so beneficial to students, not just for their education, but for their humanity. It's creating leaders as opposed to folks who will value books sitting on a shelf that nobody read, that's been plagiarized, over literally building activists, really building agents of change. Like, and that's what happens in the Free Saturday School. And this is just my little shameless plug, because I really think this should be our motto, that steel sharpens steel, because everybody is coming from different activist spaces and doing different work. And in the space, we kind of like come to a new understanding, right? And then we can go off and do work with that new understanding together. And I think that's really important. And yeah, it's beautiful. So thank you guys.
You know, I think we got 10 minutes. I just want to tell one story about the Radical Philosophy Circle. And Cassandra was a member of it, as was Pam Africa. And remember, there were some students who came as though the Radical Philosophy Circle was the philosophy club of the philosophy department. And we had to disabuse them of that notion. We are not here to talk about academic philosophy. We're here to talk about philosophy as ideology. Remember that? And there was a little bit of a split, and my girl Sabrina sampled, and then tears flowed, but everything got back together. There was one other story I want to just tell you about, and this has to do with Pam Africa. I think Cassandra will remember this story. Pam came, I don't know that we had a lot of people that day, but she was talking about how she and her mother had become separated. And that her mother put, I'm not revealing something that she didn't, put the world ahead of her. And she resented her mother for that. And she talked about when she joined MOVE, she came to understand her mother better. But in the course of her telling this story, Wanda Jackson, who is not here right now, and Cassandra, I remember this, I don't know if you remember it this way, both of you all began to move very close to Pam. Gets to this question of trauma produced by a system of oppression, and how a woman like Pam, who through resistance and struggle had come to understand her mother and to love her mother, and others of us in the room felt close to Pam because in one another way, all of us experience trauma, separation, things that we don't understand. I guess, oh yes, Cassandra, please come forward and talk in the mic. It got you started. You didn't intend to even.
I just want to share with everybody why exactly I was so enthralled in coming to the Saturday school and bringing my, now she's 14, but she was about, 6 or 7 at the time when I was coming.
Oh, go ahead, I won't get to it.
Yeah.
And it was so, her little daughter and her would come every Saturday morning when we were at Temple, Zay, you know, who was like this tall now.
Yeah, she's towers over me. But the important thing for me, I was just coming from the military. I had served two tours in Iraq, one in Afghanistan. I've been in Korea. I mean, all the quote-unquote cesspools of the world. But I understood history from a lived experience like Kashara was talking about with Pam Anderson. Or Pam Africa, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. So that I was coming from that lived experience, and I was trying to put it together and understand it in a way that I was also teaching my daughter and understanding my relationship with her, because obviously she didn't come with me. So there was a separation and a trauma between us as well. And so hearing from Pam Africa and being around students who didn't have that same experience that I did, but we were still learning together, really taught me something, and it was really personal for me. And so when Temple said that we couldn't have the class anymore, that's why I said, you know, actually the foundation of this entire thing is philosophy. Specifically because it's one thing for me to be, quote unquote, brainwashed by the armed forces. You are going to go fight for this narrative that we've created, that we are better than the rest of the world. And you're gonna put your passion and your life on the line for that. And it's a different thing when you come back and you're on the whole other end of the spectrum. You have no financial means. You're struggling to be a part of society again in a different way. So now you're confronted with the fact that, okay, as an individual, I'm one thing. And as a group set aside and connected to something else, I'm someone totally different. And trying to manage and live that and understand it and still be a mother and a teacher to someone else is really hard. So that's what it did for me. That's what this being a part of the Saturday school did for me. That's why I thought philosophy was the most important, because from there, you know what you are, who you are, and why you are, as opposed to just being. Thanks.
Can I just ask you a question? I just want to ask her a question. You have a degree in anthropology from Temple.
I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology from Temple, yes.
And you work with veterans, especially women veterans?
Yes, I'm a national advocate for women veterans. I did a lot of social work, motivational interviewing for women veterans for the past maybe 4 years. I recently quit that job, and I started my own LLC training veterans and training organizations that hire veterans on how to utilize veterans in the workplace, because we not necessarily have the certifications, but we have a lot of lived and real world experience that people could use and should monetize. Yep.
You know, I was leading up to this question. If we look around this city, we see a lot of veterans, women and men, who are traumatized, who have problems with addictions, many whom are homeless.
Which I was, all of the above.
You? I didn't know that.
I know.
Yeah, you know, wow. Well, I was going to ask a question. Now I have to change the question.
No, you can ask.
Okay. So you had all of the problems that that most veterans have upon returning to civilian life. But you pursued learning and then philosophy as a way to address these questions.
Yes.
And how did that work in practice? Because you could have just stayed, you know, in depression and other things, or going into self-destruction, which of course would have meant that you would be destroying Zay too.
Right.
So how did learning practically, you know, help you through all of that?
Well, okay, so I think it's the love as a parent, like from mother to child, that really forced me to look at myself. You know, it's one thing, I don't know if any of you have children, but it's one thing when your child is 2 years old, you could smoke a blunt, they don't know what that is. Oh no, that's the incense, baby. You can't do that when they're 7. The world is showing them what things are, and you can't hide anymore. So I started to realize that everything I was doing, I was teaching. Not what I was saying, but what I was doing, I was teaching. And so I said, if I don't fix this now, I'm going to share things that I don't want to share. I'm going to create a life for you, experiences for you that you don't deserve and you didn't ask for. And so that's why I stopped doing self-destructive things, and I had to confront myself as opposed to, why am I doing self-destructive things? And so it goes back to all of my experiences in warfare, which is nothing like cinema, as you can imagine. So a lot of that's firsthand. I don't want to get into it, but it's graphic, and it's painful, and it creates demons that you try to hide from, okay? There's lots of triggers. Your smells, visual things, emotions, they will drive you somewhere you don't want to see, feel, or understand anymore. So you can be depressed. You can create an addictive pattern of any sort, not just drugs. Yeah, a lot of times, what you see with veterans, the addictive pattern is actually living outside. Because a lot of times in warfare, especially the Marines and the Army, of which I'm an Army veteran, you live outside. So it creates a comfort. That it's one thing to say that someone is homeless by choice. I'm opposed to that notion. But people are comfortable in what they're used to. And that there's truth in that. So I think the love for my child is what forced me to confront these things, but then getting a philosophical understanding through Dr. Montero and my own personal understanding of what history really is, because I lived pieces of history, really helped me hone in what is my foundation. Because if I don't know it internally, mentally, I can't embody it and I can't live it. So as much as I was trying to beat a pattern or beat an addiction, it wasn't going anywhere until I had a foundation to put it on. So it's really similar to being religious or any other philosophical basis. That's why, it's just a matter of having a baseline of this is who I am, this is what I will accept and won't accept for myself, and these are the very clear reasons as to why.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. Munchie. Come on up here, Munch. Come on up here. The last speaker will be Munchie.
When the shipyard closed in '95, I always wanted to volunteer. My mother, when she retired from teaching, she literally was a missionary. And she worked with Father Divines people, traveled all over. And so when the yard closed in '95, I volunteered with this church to feed the people. And it was funny because people in the neighborhood thought that I was doing that bad. I was in there getting the food myself. But that's how South Philly is. But I had gotten tired. It bothered me. I started to lose sleep over it because I was running into, first of all, friends of mine, men I knew and women, and a lot of veterans. And these guys, a lot of men and women, they had mental problems. And there was no hope. There was no one to help them. And being around the military, I was around the Marines and the Navy. I knew what time, I worked around them. So I knew the talk and muster and all that kind of stuff. And it really, it was very painful. And I want also about the children. Like, if you look at the news, you don't see the children or the women. That's who suffer in these wars. And it ain't the men who fight them and the women who fight them, they get beat up. But the people who really hurt are the women and children. Because I remember that years ago, that little young girl it was in Vietnam. And I think that it was different. You had reporters reporting on this stuff. But this is happening all over Pakistan. It doesn't, it's amazing how they just keep this stuff down. I think they've learned from Vietnam to keep you stupid. Because it is definitely who suffers in these things. The people who can't fight back. Maybe that's just the way. Here one time told me that's the way the world is. You either fight back or you get done too. But I think that the horrible part, what we see now, is the fact that we really don't know any information, what's going on. And the veterans are suffering. They really, I don't know anybody I know personally, and I know a bunch of them that went to Vietnam that's not suffering right now with some kind of malady. I got friends right now with my cousin, my first cousin. There's all kinds of things wrong with them, and that's from what was over there. That's all.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Nanditha to come forward and tell us where we go from here. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank the audience. To all of the panelists, this was really extraordinary. This is Susan Abu Hawa. She's a member of the Free School, but she's also a phenomenal novelist and of the Palestinian struggle, and she's a poet as well, so I just wanted to introduce her that way.
So I'm just going to read a couple of poems from this little collection I published a few years ago. The first one is called Wala. And Wala in Arabic means, there's no English equivalent, but it loosely translates to the word boy. And it can have multiple meanings depending on context. So, like a mother might, call to her son, Wala, come here, boy, and it's loving and it's sweet and or this is my boy. But it takes on a completely different meaning, for example, when a white man says that to a grown black man, right? So a A lot of Israelis will refer to grown Arab men as wala, at checkpoints and so forth. Come here, wala, go there, wala. And so this poem is inspired by, I don't know if you've all seen the Palestinian laborers who line up like 3 o'clock in the morning to wait for the checkpoints to open so they can go to their jobs. And the enclosure that they line up in was built, the inspiration for that architecture was from cattle cages. And that's what the architect who designed them said he got his inspiration from. So you see these human beings crammed into these metal sort of enclosures. So that's what I refer to here as the cattle cage. It's 3 a.m. in the cattle cage. The line is long and thick with bodies. You wait. A jibna sandwich with cucumber in a plastic bag clutched in your calloused laborer's hand. Your wife prepared your breakfast and your lunch. She was up before you, and together you prayed a pre-dawn salat. She kissed your face and said, Allah ma'ak ya habibi. Allah be with you, my love. You kiss the faces of your sleeping babies. You haven't seen them awake in months, and you wonder, has Walid's voice begun to crack yet? Have Wijdad's hips begun to flare? How big was Suraya's smile when she came home with her report card? It's 4 a.m. in the cattle cage. Still, you wait. The line before you is so long, and behind you now it is longer. Few of you speak. You're packed so damn tight that you hold one another upright. You see your own fatigue reflected in the weariness etched on the faces all around you. You look away. You pine for a smoke. But who the hell can afford that? You stare at the graffiti beyond the iron bars holding you in, written just for you, written by Zionist settlers sucking the breath from your lungs. You understand the meaning of their English words, die, sand niggers. Sometimes you pine for that too. It's 5 a.m. in the cattle cage. The soldiers arrive. The line loosens. You take one step forward, propelled by the weight of the bodies behind you. Your jibna sandwich with cucumber in a plastic bag is crushed. It never survives. It's 7 a.m. in the cattle cage. Now is your turn. You produce your papers, unfold, refold, eyes down, heart down, your shoes are down on their luck, but you're out of the line now. 15 men before you were pulled aside, and you tried not to look. You tried not to hear the one begging, please don't hit me. It's 7:30 a.m. now on the cattle bus, and you ride. The country they stole from you speeds outside your window, and you imagine the man you would have been, the man you should have been out there, riding the family steed, the thoroughbred mares your grandfather raised and nurtured and loved in a Palestine unraped, unstolen. It's 8 a.m. You get off the cattle bus. Your crushed jibna sandwich with cucumber in a plastic bag in one hand, your eyes down, your heart down. You put your toolbox down to knock on the Zionist settler's back door where the help goes. But the Zionist settler boss man yells, Wala, mish hon el-yom. Not there today, boy. And all you can do is thank Allah that your wife and your babies are not there to hear them call you Wala. This next poem is called Sister Palestinian. It's mostly self-explanatory, so no prefacing. Sister Palestinian, your fate was written the day you played hopscotch when they pulled the land from under your feet. So you carried your country on your back in the bags handed to you on the long march to oblivion. When your father king of his castle, was forced to sleep on dirt, you served him coffee and scrubbed his feet to save his pride. When your mother went mad and died with anguish, your tears watered a refugee's garden. Someone put 2 gold bracelets on your wrist, the braided bangles we all wear, and you stared at them on your wedding night as you gripped the bedposts with white knuckles. The first time your husband hit you, it nearly knocked the country off your back. But your first baby was a promise too precious, so you sewed Palestine to your skin. When he came back from Israel's prison, you tenderly dressed his wounds, kissed them, and you prayed for him. You loved him, and he left 5 months after your second daughter was born. European women, he said, knew how to please a man. He said, you had never really been an exciting fuck. He didn't mind that European women could not pronounce his name. He never knew about his third daughter, whom you named Feiruz, for the voice that was your only solace. When another of history's storms raised your house, the winds carried you to foreign lands, and you were at home in the devastating freedom of answering to no one. When then you became an exciting fuck, you found yourself searching over and over for some meaning in the heartbreak of an empty orgasm. The girls you raised were not Palestinian. The house you built was not yours. The country tethered to your skin sags as if a body of sorrow. You deserve better, sister. Come back in another life to a country that holds you, a man who honors the language of your heart, and daughters who will sing for you a Palestinian lullaby before you finally sleep. Thank you.
I'd just like to welcome Pam Africa here. We've been talking about Pam all morning. So how are you, Pam? And also her colleague, comrade, and a friend of mine, Kamal Bektemba. Welcome, Kamal. That's Kamal right there. Okay, so now we're going to proceed. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me.
We're going to have one last performance before lunch. And then after lunch, we'll meet again at 2 in the sanctuary. So we're shifting to the sanctuary after lunch. But here's welcoming Mark, and he's a rapper, and he's very talented, so listen closely.
This song is called It's Like Love. So excuse if some gruff language comes out. Trust me, it's not the meaning. They don't know, they don't know, they don't know. Yeah. Feel free to move if you want to. We breaking out of conference mode. Check it out. Metaphors and margins. It's a peep show. Yeah, I am charging you in your squadron. Cell calls to God, so you move your phone to the window to get the balls in. Trust me, I get balls in. Yeah, I get balls in. Word to white tossing. Swinging on the line, I drop a line like Johnny Carson. Hip hop dry as hell. A desert lead we through, cause of the Bach 2. Tell me of your tales of love. What have you been through? Has a nigga done you bad? Has he run away from you? The truth will shred you in the face and never let you. The people that swear they love you will probably never get you. So holla at the truth tellers, the one with the third eye. The haters, naysayers, yo, they need not apply. The Nancy Reagan to that free Ray Ricky, oh my mind. So a new generation of kids slinging empires. Cause love's in the field of contradiction. She spoke easy to my love. Words were drunk like prohibition. I was drowning in a rising tide. It's like white guilt, it never subsides. I be on it, living just to love. I'll be on it. Say it with me. Living just to love. Second part, to live is to suffer all kind of loss. You can see my pain like the stations of the cross. and cold. 30 pieces of Judas land, you niggas done sold, and who died and made you oligarch. Tunnel light through the dark. The only love that I relate to is fear, and as a result, my heart is hard. And cold, I'm feeling contempt to the ceiling. I know that I can speak love from my hips and still draw hate from my lips. Two-faced love is unappealing, compartmentalized. And the neighbor pessimism styles. Two truths, one lie. Railroad crossing, facing off with destiny. Playing chicken with the truth, trying not to die. Yeah. Kind of messed up a little bit, but I wrote that like Thursday, so give me a break. Say it with me. I be on that. Say, living just to love. Come on. Living just to love. Say it. Living just to love.